we are talking about Unit 2 of this paper called Indian Classical Literature. And you would know Unit 2 is this Sanskrit play called Abhigyana Shakuntalam by Kalidas. Now, this play is very, very important. This actually is one of the most important plays if you're thinking about Indian literature, not just in Sanskrit, but the whole big category of Indian literature. If you're thinking about, you definitely have to mention Abhigana Shakuntalam. There is no way that you can miss out on this. This happens to be one of the first plays ever to be translated in English. And obviously, you can imagine if a play is translated in English, then it is easier for it to be translated in other languages because English is more accessible and is more widely known in the world. So from that, uh, it's from that fact itself, you can know that how important this play is to the canon of Indian literature, Indian classical literature, and which is why we have this in the text. Uh, because this is a revision class, so I'm assuming you would know that this play is a tale of King Dushyant and Shakuntala. And where do we find these characters before this play? We find them in Mahabharata. Mahabharata is something that you have in your unit 1. So this comes really handy. So from Mahabharata, there is a small tale in Mahabharata of King Dushyanta and Shakuntala. Kalidas takes this small tale from there and writes up a complete drama. Obviously, it is a small story in Mahabharata, but now we have this entire drama. So you would imagine that Kalidas would definitely do something with this story, right? He would maybe add something to it, maybe he would remove something from it, maybe he would have an opinion that would show in his rendition of the story that he takes from Mahabharata, right? Uh, before we actually start talking about the play, it might be helpful to know a little about Kalidas. I say that, but obviously there is very little known about Kalidas as a writer, as a person, because not much is documented. We have to do a lot of conjecture. We also have to do a lot of guesswork if we want to know anything about Kalidas, right? So there is no written record of his existence, so to say, but we have the literature that he has created, and when we read these pieces of literature, there are certain references that you can pick and and draw from it. And we know, for instance, that Vikramaditya, King Vikramaditya, was the patron of Kalidas. So because we know the timelines of Vikramaditya, we can sort of make a guess that if he was the patron, then Kalidas must have lived around 4th century during the Gupta Empire, right? So this is the sort of conjecture that you have to do. You have to read these texts that we have available, and for instance, you would find that there is a reference to the city of Ujjaini. So in some of his plays. So from that you can make out that maybe Kalidasa lived in the city of Ujjain, or maybe he traveled in the city of Ujjain. So these are the things that we know. There is a very very great description of of multiple places actually, but particularly Himalayas in his place, including a beginner Shakuntalam. So we can sort of make a guess that maybe he also went to the Himalayas and he must have traveled there, because the descriptions that we have of Himalayas, they seem very real. They seem as if the person has actually seen it and then he has written it. So this is how we know whatever we know about Kalidas. We have to read these texts and we have to take out information and see if it adds anything to the knowledge of the man. Okay, moving on. Uh, we can pay a little attention to the name of the play itself a little. Abhigyana Shakuntala. Abhigyana Shakuntalam, the word means recognition of Shakuntala by a token. Like if I were to translate Abhigyana Shakuntalam, that it would translate into recognition of Shakuntala by a token, roughly. Um, Now, This is significant. This is important because this title tells us a lot actually about what is to happen in the play itself, right? So the title shows, throws light on the plot, and we'll see how. Um, okay, at this point, maybe it is helpful if I were to tell you roughly what the story of the play is. Um, So what happens in Mahabharat is that there is this king called Dushyant, and he sees Shakuntala. He falls in love with her. Shakuntala also falls in love with Dushyant, and they do what is called a Gandharva Vivah. And thereafter, Dushyant has to go back, and later we find out that Shakuntala is pregnant, and then she's to go to Dushyant's palace to have the life of the wife that she is. But Dushyant refuses her and does not accept her um, as his wife, and he does that deliberately. So this is what happens in Mahabharata. However, when Kalidas rewrites the story, he makes a lot of changes. Uh, what happens in this play? This play starts in a very pastoral setting, right? Pastoral as in a setting that is full of greenery, nature, trees, and all of that, right? In a very pastoral setting, it starts. We have this very beautiful, extremely beautiful girl, Shakuntala. Dushyant is a king who is accompanied by a friend, and he sees her and instantly falls in love with her because obviously Shakuntala is the most beautiful girl in the world. He falls in love with her. Shakuntala also looks at him, falls in love. Um, However, nothing happens at that point. They are both in love and they're pining for each other in isolation. And we have these huge descriptions as to what happens to them when they are in love, but they're not able to do anything about it. They have not confessed anything yet, but they're pining for each other. Then story moves a little ahead, and Dushyant actually approaches Shakuntala, and he confesses his feeling towards her, and they get married in the forest, and nobody knows about this marriage, but the two. Then Dushyant is a king, as I was saying, and he's a great king. Okay, and he is a king who has a lot of duties in this play, particularly, right? So he does not have his kingdom to take care of, but he is also a man who is helping these sages, who are troubled by these evil spirits, who are troubled by the asuras and all of that. So he has a lot to take care of. So his responsibilities are on one end, and then there is love, Shakuntala on the other. So he has to go. But then he presents Shakuntala with a ring, uh, and leaves her and promises her that he will come back and take her with him as his wife. But that doesn't happen. When Dushyant goes away, he gets really busy with his kingly duties, and Shakuntala is left where she was in the ashram that she was staying in. She was staying in uh, sage Kanva's ashram, ascetic Kanva's ashram. She stays there. Dushyant has left. She is pregnant, of course. Uh, then Kanva comes back to the ashram, and he sees this whole situation, and he plans out her departure from the ashram when he sees the girl who is still in love and is very pregnant. So she has to go to the husband's place now. Uh, but before that happens, uh, at one point, because as I was saying, she is pining, she is missing Dushyant a lot, and she's just thinking about him all the time. What happens in the story is at one point, there is a sage called Durvasa. He happens to come to the ashram, and Durvasa asks for something to Shakuntala, but she is in love with Dushyant and she's thinking about him and she's lovesick and all of that is happening. So she doesn't pay attention to Durvasa, and Durvasa gets really upset, and he sees that as an insult to himself, and he curses Shakuntala that whoever you are thinking about, because of which you are ignoring this great ascetic, because Durvasa is a great ascetic, and he says that whoever you are thinking about right now, he will forget you, and you would not have anywhere to go. And this is a big curse. And Shakuntala doesn't even know about the curse, by the way. This is witnessed by Shakuntala's friend at the ashram, Priyamvada. So she basically, then asks for forgiveness, and she says, please don't be so harsh to Durvasa. And Durvasa then warms up a little, and he says that, okay, if at all this girl meets the guy, uh, if she presents her with, if she presents him with a token, then the guy would remember her, right? And this is the token that I was talking about in the title. So this is the token. So I told you, right? Dushyanta had given a ring to Shakuntala, so that becomes the token. And Durvasa says that Dushyanta will have forgotten about Shakuntala, but if Shakuntala presents the king with the ring, he will remember everything, and he will accept Shakuntala. And so this is the curse. After that, Kanva comes back to the ashram, and he decides that he has to send the girl to her husband, and that happens. Shakuntala goes to Dushanta's palace, and again the curse works, and Durvasa's curse works, and Dushyant does not recognize Shakuntala. Dushanta says that I don't know who this woman is, and I don't know whose child it is, and I cannot accept this. And he calls her a trickster and all of that. And obviously Shakuntala is heartbroken because she is with a child, and where would she go now? So this is a very desperate state that she's put in. Then she remembers that maybe I will present him with a ring, and he will remember. But she finds out that she has actually lost the ring when she was probably bathing or something. She has lost her ring. Then, and thus it is proved in the court that Shakuntala was actually not Dushanta's wife, and she is just this woman, and she's just there for whatever reason. And Dushanta doesn't accept her. Um, then things happen. Then Shakuntala is taken by these angels to some other ashram, and the kid as well. Later on, a fisherman is found out in the Shanta's city, and this fisherman is basically accused of stealing a ring that might have belonged to King Dushyant because it's a very expensive ring. And when this fisherman is produced in the court in front of Dushyanta, he sees the ring and he immediately remembers Shakuntala, and he realizes that he has made a mistake and he had forgotten about his wife, and then he pines for her again, and he is very guilty, and all of that happens, and it's a very very sad tale. He really cries a lot, and he is thinking about her, and he is making paintings of Shakuntala, and all of that is happening. It's a very very dramatic play. It's a very very sad play. Um, so all of this is happening. Then, then chance, like a lot of events happen. And I was talking about earlier, Dushanta is a very good king, right? And he is a very competent man as well. So he is often called by these ascetics to 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 uh, to fight these asuras that are troubling them. So this happens once again. Indra actually calls him, like I'm being troubled by these asuras. Why don't you come and help me? So Dushanta goes to this place, and by chance he finds a boy. He finds a boy, and he immediately senses a familiarity with the boy, even though he has not seen this little child. But he looks at him, and he thinks there is something that is attractive about the guy, about the boy. And uh, and who is the boy? The boy is actually his boy. The boy is the child of Dushanta and Shakuntala. And then obviously a reunion happens. Dushanta sees Shakuntala, and eventually takes Shakuntala back to his palace, and the story ends. Right? So this is more or less what happens in the story. However, we are obviously students of literature, so this is not what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to know the story, but we have to look at the story and look at the story again and again and again, and we need to understand uh, and we need to read between the lines, basically. Right? A story is given to you, but that is not enough. You have to read the story with a critical mind, and you have to analyze it as to what is the writer really saying, or is there something more to it than the writer is actually saying, right? So these are the things that you want to do with your piece of literature that you have. Story is not enough is what I'm saying. um okay, so I said a couple minutes earlier that this is a very sad play. It is a tragic play. A lot of tragedy is unfolding in the play. Now, when I say that, you must be reminded of Western. You must be reminded of tragedy itself. And where would you have read tragedy? You would have read tragedy when you were reading your European classical paper, right? There we have this whole treatise on what is a tragedy, how is a tragedy written by Aristotle. So we have a very good account. We have a very good sort of a rule book, so to say, for tragedies, right? In the Western tradition. So let's see, is there any similarity or are there any differences, between this tragic play and the tragedies that we see in the Western canon? So you would know Aristotle says that a tragedy is involves a tragic hero. You have a hero who is a brilliant man, who is a great man, who has done great things in life, uh, and then he undergoes a tragic fall. So it starts from up here and then it falls. There happens a downfall of a tragic hero. And what causes that downfall is a tragic flaw in the character himself, right? So there is a flaw in the character of the hero that causes the downfall, right? A tragic hero makes a mistake which causes a series of events and his eventual downfall. And what makes it tragic is the fact that this is not unavoidable, right? He could have done something different. And the other thing that makes it more tragic is how he actually accepts or faces his downfall. Right? As I've already told you, that a tragic hero is a great man. So when a great man is met with with the downfall, he has to he has to face it in a certain way. Right? So even though a tragic hero is gonna die, is his life is ending, but he will accept that end in a very courageous way. And that causes um you know sublimity, and that causes this thing called purgation of emotions and all of that in the audience. That's when you feel the most about the tragic hero. However, when we look at this tragic play, A Beginner Shakuntalam, I've told you, like, there's a lot of sadness in the play. You have these evil spirits who are troubling the ascetics. So the ascetics are sad. You have this Durvasa's curse, which is extremely tragic because Dushyanta and Shakuntala are so much in love, but Durvasa's curse uh, makes the love disappear in a way. So that is also very, very sad, and it causes a lot of problem in Shakuntala's and Dushyanta's life. Uh, then obviously Shakuntala has great friends. They are sad because she is sad. uh, then Shakuntala lives in this Kanva's ashram, right? This ascetic Kanva's ashram. Now, there comes a point when Shakuntala has to leave the quote unquote the father's house to the husband's house. That causes immense sadness as well. You have like great description where Kanva is admitting that he's extremely sad because his daughter is going away. Then you have the king sad as well. Later on in the story, when Dushanta realizes his mistake, he is extremely sad, right? He is he is sad because he has lost his love. He is also sad because he thinks that he will forever be childless, right? And he's sad that his line, like as in the Kuru clan that he comes from, his whole lineage will end with him because he's childless. There's a lot of sadness. However, Western tragedies often end in death. Here, our Sanskrit tragedy, this tragedy doesn't end in death. Actually, this ends in a reunion. This ends in a happy note. So you can think about it. Like, why is it that a Western tragedy is a different is different from the tragedy that we have in the Sanskrit tradition? And the answer really is not very difficult, because that literature is a product of its culture. So it develops organically. So if we in our culture, uh, tragedy developed in this way, maybe it was supposed to be like that. Maybe if this play ends in the death of Dushyant or in the end of Shakuntala, maybe it would not have been resonated with the culture so nicely. Maybe it is important for us that they actually reunite in the end. So there is a difference between the West and this tragedy, um, but there is a reason for it. So I would say that it is a tragic play in many ways. There is a lot of tragedy unfolding, but it is not tragedy in the Western sense at all, right? So something to think about there. The other difference you can think of between Western and the Sanskrit play here is the the focus on the the emotions in the Sanskrit one, right? So there is an immense focus on whatever the characters are feeling and how that feeling that the characters are feeling that is replicated in the minds of the audience. This is very central to 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 Sanskrit poetics as a whole. Right. So there's this whole, so you can probably refer to Natya Shastra, right? So Natya Shastra tells you uh, about this rasa theory that we have in the Sanskrit poetics, in the Sanskrit tradition of writing drama and poetry, that we are looking for an emotional response in the characters, which then causes an emotional response in the audience, right? So you have eight rasas, for instance. You have, I'll just quickly read out the names for you. Shringar ras, which is erotic. You have Hasya ras, which is comic. You have Karuna ras, which is pathetic. You have Raudra ras, which is furious. uh, you have Veer Ras, which is heroic. You have Bhayank Ras, which is terrible. You have Bibats Ras, which is odious, and Adbhut, which means marvelous. Right. So you will see in this play, you would have a lot of Shringar Ras. Right. There is a lot of eroticism that's going on, from the description of Shakuntala to describe to how she falls in love with Dushyanta and Dushyanta falls in love with him. Love is very one of the central themes actually in this play. There is a great deal of love that's happening. It's a love story, right? So you want to look at love. Then there is obviously, like, it's a very emotionally driven play. If you read it, if you watch it, you will feel a lot of emotions, and that's exactly what the writer wants you to feel, right? Now, I've already talked about how Kalidas is rewriting um, this story from Mahabharata in the form of a play. Right. I've already told you that if he is doing that, there must be some differences or some similarities there. So if those are there, those similarities or differences, as critical readers, we would want to pay attention, we would want to think about as to why are these differences or similarities there. You know, is there something more to it? Is there something that we can, understand more about the play and more about the Kalidasa while we look at this? For instance, I can tell you that Shakuntala character, actually Shakuntala's character is very different in Mahabharat than in this play, right? Kalidas absolutely romanticizes the character here. She is extremely beautiful, right? And what he another thing he does is, apart from romanticization and apart from glorification and beautification, uh, he also makes her a very submissive character as well. uh, right, so she is this extremely pretty, extremely soft, extremely susceptible, vulnerable woman who lives in a very pastoral setting. Right. So it is all flowers and deers and trees and rivers. You know, you can imagine the situation. It's very pretty and all beautiful. And she's there in the scenery, and she is a part of it, or she's a part of nature, right? So she's extremely innocent. Nature in literature is often associated with innocence, so pay attention to that. So she's a very innocent character, and she's a very um not very active, so to say. She is a lot of the times very passive, a receiver sort of character, right? So so that is a difference there. And in terms of, analyzing it, maybe you can think about, maybe Kalidasa makes this woman character so submissive and so soft, because maybe it was expected out of a woman in his times. Maybe you can make a conjecture like that. Maybe it tells us something about the status of women, in Kalidasa's time, that maybe if a woman is to be appreciated, she has to be pretty, she has to be submissive, she has to be this soft, gentle, innocent woman, right? Because she is, I mean, there is no doubt about it that Kalidasa is in love with Shakuntala. And what what makes her so lovable? Maybe these characteristics, what I've just talked about. Um, so that is different. There is not so much of attention to this in Mahabharat Shakuntala. So that is difference number one. The second very, very important change that Kalidasa makes is in the character of Dushant, actually. So in Mahabharata, there is no Durvasa, there is no curse. In Mahabharata's story, Dushant actually recalls Shakuntala but does not recognize her, right, publicly. He absolutely remembers her, but there is something in him that stops him from accepting her. So there is a sense of malice as well, because he has married this woman in isolation, and he has a child with her, but he doesn't accept her. So this is not a very positive thing to do, right? But Kalidasa changes it completely. Kalidasa introduces the curse in the story, and when you read it, you sympathize with Dushyanta's character because he is not at fault at all, right? Because he forgets Shakuntala, and the curse even is not his fault. Curse is actually Shakuntala's fault because she was lost in his dream, and that is why they got the curse. So Kalidasa absolutely absolves Dushyant out of any responsibility. So he is a sympathetic character. He's a tragic character in that sense, that he is so helpless. He can't do anything about it. And he is absolutely at no fault here. Now, we want to think about it as to why it might be. And maybe the answer is in the fact that Dushanta is a king, and maybe Kalidasa is trying to write a certain kind of king, right? Because he had patrons in real life, etc. So maybe he is trying to write a certain kind of king. So this king cannot be a king who who is malicious, right? Or who is somebody who can do harm to someone. Remember, Dushyanta in Kalidas's play is is a very good man, right? He is not just taking care of his kingdom, right? He's not just responsible for you know the livelihood or whatever of the kingdom, of the sustenance of the kingdom, but he's also responsible for the welfare of the people, right? He's a good king. He is talking to them, he's thinking about them. Apart from the kingdom, he is also helping the ascetics, who are living here and there. He is also helping out the gods, actually. Indra calls him, remember, to fight the asuras. So he's a very good man. So if he's a good man, then he cannot make that sort of mistake. So maybe Kalidasa is trying to, glorify the king for maybe the king that he would find in real life. I mean, we don't know. We can only make conjectures, as I was talking about earlier. So this is a very, very important change that Kalidasa makes, that his male character isn't really at fault. And he is just, unfortunate, let's just say. He's an unfortunate man, but he's not a bad man at all. He's a good man at heart. The other difference is, of course, because as I've already told you, that in Sanskrit poetics, uh, these rasas are very important, emotions are very important. So you would find that how Kalidasa writes this story of Dushyanta and Shakuntala, this is very emotionally charged. If you're reading it, you are bound to be swayed by the emotions, right? For instance, how he describes Shakuntala, you will immediately fall in love with her, right? Then when you see Shakuntala crying, you want to cry. When you see Dushyanta fighting the demons, you root for him. You are charged that way. Then when they are finally reunited, Dushyanta and Shakuntala, you feel happy for them. So it's a very emotionally charged play, and it gives you a variety of emotions at that as well. So this is another difference that Kalidasa is making to the story. So these are the certain differences that you can find, and it tells us really a lot about the society, a lot about Kalidasa himself, and of course the story that we have. Um, we can now move on and talk about a little politics here as well, right? So I've told you already. I mean, this is absolutely no doubt that this is a love story, and love is one of the central themes of the play, right? There is a great deal of attention in creating these characters who are absolutely in love with each other. So that is a given. But we want to move ahead in this, and we want to make other claims as well, that what is there in this play apart from love. So, two things I will talk about. One is apart from love, there is a great attention paid on the king, on the role of the king, on the kingship, right? So that is also very, very important and central to this play, which is often overlooked. So we don't want to overlook that. So we'll talk about that. The other thing that I want to talk about is something that I already touched upon, but I'll pay more attention, and I'll talk about it in a much more detail, is the status of women, right? So here, I've already told you that Shakuntala is the main woman character in this play, and what is Kalidasa doing to her is he is making her submissive. He is making her very soft and very innocent. You will often find Shakuntala in this play waiting. Literally, she's just waiting for Dushyanta to come and do things. For instance, when they first see each other, both of them actually fall in love. But Shakuntala is just there and waiting for Dushyanta to arrive at some point and confess his feelings. She doesn't look like an active doer in many of the cases. And she is waiting. That is one instance of waiting. Then after that, they get married and everything, and Dushyanta leaves, and he says that wait for me, and I'll come back and I'll take you from here and take you to the palace, etc. Then again, there is this great deal of waiting that she has to do. So first she's waiting for the love confession, then she is waiting for him to come back to take to her, and then uh, when she finally goes to Dushanta's palace, which again is a decision that Kanva makes and not she. She goes there and he rejects her, and then she goes to this other place where she will, birth the child, and she will bring up the child. Child is called Bharat, by the way. Their son is called Bharat. There again, she's just waiting for someday, that Dushanta will arrive and will take Shakuntala and will Bharat back. Then again, she's just waiting. So a character who is just waiting for things to happen. So she's not an active participant, so to say, in action, right? She she appears to be more like a decoration in that way, because I've already told you she is extremely beautiful, right? So Kalidasa is sort of making this woman character who's very lovable, who's very likable, but at the same time, she's very submissive and very passive as well. That she will accept her fate for whatever it is. If Dushanta rejects her, she is rejected, right? She can't do anything about it. Um, the other than waiting, she's also suffering, right? In her waiting there is also suffering, so the woman character here uh is suffering more than she's doing anything to to ward off the suffering. So she's beautiful to look at. You are constantly looking at her. In this play you would find the Shakuntala is a thing to look at, uh, because she's pretty and she's suffering and she's sad. You root for her, but she's not really doing anything. She has roles to play though, right? And what are these roles? Uh, these roles, Kanva actually tells her what are her role as a woman in the society. So when Kanva is is bidding for farewell from the ashram so that she can go back to Dushanta's palace. He says these things, and I'll just read the lines for you. These are Kanva's words. Serve your elders with diligence. Be a friend to your co-wives. Even if wronged by your husband, do not cross him through anger. Treat those who serve you with the utmost courtesy. Be not puffed up with pride by wealth and pleasures. Thus do girls attain the status of mistress of the home. Those who act contrary are the bane of their families. Right? So these lines by Kanva are very good indicator of the status of women in the society. Right? We have talked about that what makes Shakuntala lovable according to Kalidasa is these things: being submissive, being innocent, being beautiful. Now we have the roles for the women as well. And what are these roles? These roles are to be diligent, to be friendly, to not be angry at all. Even if your husband wrongs you, you are not supposed to show anger, right? You have to be pleasurable. You have to behave with courtesy and all of that. Uh, and then the last line is, thus do the girls attain the status of mistress of the home. So if you want to become the mistress of the home, these are the things you have to do. And if you don't do it, then you will become the bane of the family. So you have to protect the family. You have to, and if you want to protect your family, if you don't want to become the bane on the family, then you have to be a certain way. And this is the certain way that we have here. So it's a very patriarchal idea, isn't it? It is. So this is what I had to say about the status of women in this play, and probably in the society as well. We don't know, but we can make guesses. I mean, these are the expectations most probably people would have out of women during Kalidasa's time. Um, Now we can move on, and I can talk about the other thing that I was talking about was the fact that apart from love, the other very strong theme in this play is it pertains to kings and kingship and the role of the king, right? Uh, so you will see that Dushanta in this play is doing only two things. A, he is in love with Shakuntala, he's marrying her and all of that. He's thinking about her. So love is one thing Dushanta is doing, and the other thing Dushanta is doing is is performing his kingly duties, right? Which is what? Which is governing the his court, his palace, his city, and secondly is helping out these gods and helping out these ascetics. So these are the only two things Dushanta is involved in this play. So thus we can say that this comes out very very strongly. What is a king supposed to do? So we can also see that because these are the only two things that this king is doing. This other thing, this the kingly duties plot, this sort of comes in contention with the love plot, isn't it? Because you would remember that he's in love with her and he is with her, but then he has to go back. Why? Because his duties call him, and then he has to go. So these duties, so to say, uh, challenges the love here, that he has to leave the love at point A because point B requires him to be a king there, right? So that is one. Secondly, of course, I've already touched upon this, that the role of the king is not just to govern, and role of the king is not just to be seated on a throne, but the role of a king requires much more out of you, and it is to maintain an equilibrium in society, right? So there are good forces in the society and there are bad forces in the society. So as a king, as a good king, the Shantis, it is his responsibility to maintain to maintain an equilibrium, to suppress the evildoers, to suppress the evildoers in this play. For instance, would be demons and asuras that are troubling these ascetics, and they're stopping these ascetics to do their spiritual work, their pujas and all of that. So it is the role of a king to maintain that. It is the role of the king to sort of make an environment that is conducive for everyone to exist, right? Because we want the ascetics to perform their duties, so it is the king who will make sure that the conditions are like that, so that everybody can perform their own duties. The other thing that you want to talk about when you're talking about king and the representation of king in this play is that how Kalidasa makes this affinity between the divinity and the king. So Kalidasa is not saying that King Dushyant is God, right? He's not saying that. But you will often see that King Dushyanta is in very close proximity with the gods, right? And not just with close proximity in the sense that he's just around them, but he is very active and he is useful to them, right? So there is this close relationship that the king shares with the deities, with the divinity, with the gods. Indra calls him, right? You would remember Indra calls him to help him out and all of that. So maybe Kalidas is saying that king maybe is not God, but king is very, very powerful, so to say, in a society. And he has big roles to play. And if they are close to the deities, if they're close to the divinity, that means they are to be respected, they are to be seen as powerful people on earth, right? Because if the gods are relying on them, that means they are reliable for the public as well. So a good king is is very close to gods, is maybe what Kalidasa is saying. Um, the other way, of course, is you can see this whole king situation is that when Dushyanta realizes that he has made a mistake by not recognizing Shakuntala, he cries for her, obviously, because he is in love with her, but he also cries, and probably more, cries for the fact that he will be childless, right? And what is his cry? His cry is that the Puru clan, the lineage that he comes from, it will end here. So there will be no more kings from the Puru clan. That is his one of the concerns that he is crying about. That he will not have a son, and the Kuru clan will end there. So dynasty will end there, and that is a very very big concern, and that warrants the tears, and that warrants the pain and suffering that he's going through. So Kalidasa is very much interested in how the kings work and what are the king's duties and what is the importance of kings on earth and elsewhere and all of that. This is also reiterated by how the play ends as well. You would remember that how does it play end? The play ends. Uh, so the play ends with this ascetic called Maricha, and Maricha basically looks at Bharat, the child of Dushanta and Shakuntala, and he looks at him, uh, and he predicts that this child will rule over the world, right? And that is how. So this is a love story, as I've already told you. A beginner Shakuntalam is a love story, but there is something more to it, right? And even the play ends. The love story does not end with the reunion, and I mean it ends with the reunion, but it doesn't end with just a celebration of the reunion, right? That is not the end. The end is that this reunion of love has now a child, and this child will grow up to become the king of the entire world. Right? That is how the play ends. And if a play ends on that note, we can imagine that Kalidasa was thinking about it very deliberately, you know. And apart from love, this whole idea of king and kingship and dynasty and all of that is very very important to him, and that is why the play ends in a certain way. Um, I think this is what I have to say about the play. I mean, I don't think there are no students. Anybody has any questions that I can answer? I don't suppose so. All right. Okay. So when we are thinking about Kalidas, I mean, he's written other plays as well, like apart from Avagina Shakuntalam. One thing is very common to his plays, and especially in this play, I've already talked about how the setting is so pastoral. So Kalidasa is actually one of the greatest writers who have written about this nature in this way. That this play, when you read it, it really feels like a green sort of play. The scenery is described in such a way, like you have these great descriptions of where Shakuntala is living, and you have great descriptions of the Himalayas and all of it. Kalidasa is really a nature's poet in that way. Like even when he tries to describe Shakuntala's beauty, a lot of the metaphors are actually very nature centric. She's compared to a fawn, for instance, like a small deer and all of that. Talking about the animals and plants and all of that. It's very central to Kalidasa to talk about nature in such a beautiful way, in such a way that it inspires you, really. It's a beautiful play. All right. So that would be it. Um, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Uh, and I all the best for exams, I guess. Thank you.
हेलो।
हेलो। हाँ सर, हो
मैडम।
गया ये। हाँ जी सर।
ओके मैडम, रिकॉर्डिंग कर रहा हूँ मैं।
सर, हाँ जी, आप मेरे को वो बता दीजिए, बैकग्राउंड का आप क्या बोल रहे थे?
जी मैडम, बैकग्राउंड मैडम जो एसीएस वाला ग्रुप है ना हमारा,
व्हाट्सएप पर?
तो एसीएस ग्रुप है, या तो आप अपना नंबर शेयर कर दीजिए मेरे को, मैं उसमें भेज देता हूँ।
हाँ जी, हाँ मैं बता दूं आपको नंबर।
हाँ नंबर बोलिए आप।
हाँ, 94।
एक मिनट। नाइन
हाँ जी,
फोर
57
फाइव सेवन
397
थ्री नाइन
7
सेवन
804
803
4।
4। मैं बोलता हूँ 9457397804, है ना?
हाँ जी सर।
या तो एक काम करिए, मैं मिस्टर आनंद का नंबर दे देता हूँ, वो आपको बता देंगे।
अच्छा सर, ठीक है।
आनंद को जानते हो आप?
नहीं, मैं तो नहीं जानती हूँ सर।
चलो कोई बात नहीं, फिर मैं आपको शेयर कर देता हूँ। ठीक।
ठीक ठीक है सर। ओके।
ओके ओके।
ओके, थैंक यू।